So you want to learn how to use alcohol markers like a pro? The first step to achieving smooth gradients is understanding your tools. If you're using alcohol markers like Copics, Prismacolors or Huhuhus like me, you've got some powerful tools in your hands. Alcohol markers are known for their smooth application and blendability, making them a favorite among coloring artists. But before we dive into techniques, it's important to understand how these markers actually work. Each marker usually comes with two ends: a broad chip chisel for covering large areas, and a fine or brush tip for more detailed work. When it comes to blending, the brush tip is going to be your best friend. It allows for smooth controlled strokes, and it's ideal for the flicking technique that we'll cover later on in this video. If you'd like to follow along with the same coloring page, I'll leave a link to my coloring book below. This is one of my coloring books that I illustrated, so I'm so excited to show it to you guys. The next step is protecting your work with sheets. So at the beginning of this video, you might have seen me put a piece of paper behind the page I'm coloring. Before you start coloring, there's something critical to consider. The paper in your coloring book or your sketchbook, if it has thin paper, which often case it does, the ink from the alcohol markers can easily bleed through the page onto the next page, and this is frustrating, especially if you're proud of your work you're doing and you don't want it to ruin what's on the next page. So here's a really easy and effective way to have a solution for that, and always put a protective sheet like a bit of cardstock or plastic. I used a little bit of baking paper behind the page that I'm working on, and this works perfectly well. This will prevent the ink from seeping through and protect the following pages in your book. I've learned this the hard way after accidentally ruining a few pages myself. Now, it's a habit that I never skip, and it gives me a peace of mind to focus on blending without worrying about the bleed through. The next step is starting light and layering up. This is so essential because I never knew this in the beginning. But it's time for us to actually dive into the actual coloring part. And one of the most important things to remember when working on alcohol markers is starting light. Trust me, I've been there before, rushing in with the bold colors, only to end up with harsh, unblendable lines that look a little bit ugly. Instead, begin with your lightest shade and gradually layer on darker shades. Alcohol markers are transparent, which means they allow the layers beneath them to show through, creating a rich, blended effect. Lay down your base color first with a light hand, and then slowly build up depth by layering your darker shades on top. This approach gives you more control, and it helps you avoid any unwanted surprises. So I really love this technique. The next step is mastering the flicking technique. Now, when I figured this out, it was a game changer. Now let's talk about what's going to take your blending to the next level. The flicking technique is all about using the tip of your brush. It's about using the tip of your marker to create smooth gradients. It's a simple motion that involves starting with more pressure at the beginning of your stroke, and then lifting the marker as you move it across the paper, creating a tapered line. Here's how it works. You hold your marker at a slight angle and start your stroke on the paper with a little bit more pressure. As you move the marker, flick your wrist upwards, gradually releasing the pressure. This creates a stroke that's darker at the start and fades out, perfect for blending. When blending two colors together, you can use the flick technique again. Flick your first color into the area where you want the blend to start, and then take your second color and flick it into the first color's flicked area. The overlapping strokes will blend naturally, creating that smooth transition if you're aiming for this. This technique is incredibly satisfying once you get the hang of it, and it's the key to creating those professional looking gradients. So I am absolutely obsessed with this technique. Now, the next step is taking time with your practice. This is so important, and I think so many people skip this. Coloring with alcohol markers is a skill that takes time to develop, so be patient with yourself. When I first started, I struggled to get smooth gradients as I wanted. I'm still learning now. I'm spending hours trying different techniques and getting frustrated when things don't work out perfect right away. But I know that practice makes perfect. Here's the thing, every time you practice, you're learning and improving. Even if it doesn't feel like you're doing anything at all. The more you work with your markers, the better you'll understand how they behave. You'll even start to see how different colors interact, how much pressure to use, and how to layer effectively. Don't rush the process. Take your time and enjoy the journey. Every blend you create, even the ones that don't turn out as planned, is a step forward in your artistic growth. And that's why I always love using coloring books, because it helps me to improve. The next step is drawing inspiration from others. One of the best ways that I like to improve is taking inspiration from other Instagram and TikTok artists. I love learning from the countless talented artists who share their techniques on TikTok and Instagram. I spend a lot of time watching their videos and studying how other artists use their alcohol markers. However, it's important to remember that while inspiration is great, you should always aim to develop your own style, experiment with what you learn, and adapt it to fit your own preferences and techniques. For instance, I once saw an artist use the flicking technique in a way that I hadn't considered by varying the angle and the pressure of the strokes. I tried it out and I found that it worked perfectly for me. That little tweak became a part of my own blending style. So that goes to show that you never know what you'll learn. So look to others for inspiration, but don't be afraid to put your own spin on things. That's how you'll grow as an artist and create work that's uniquely yours. And that's why I always love saving people's work on Instagram and TikTok, because it just inspires me so much. The next step is trusting the process and finding your style. Finally, the most important part of your coloring journey is to trust the process. Blending with alcohol markers can be tricky, especially when you're just starting out. There'll be times when you're frustrated, when the colors don't blend the way you want, and when you feel like just giving up altogether. I know I've been there before. But remember, every time you practice, you're getting better. The more you blend, the more you'll start to develop your own techniques and preferences. You might discover a unique way of blending that no one else is doing. Maybe you'll create gradients that are totally your own, and that's the beauty of coloring. It's all about finding what works for you. And that's why I love using coloring books, because it's so relaxing and you can experiment on what works and then try it out in your own art later on. So take a deep breath, grab your markers and start coloring. Trust yourself, trust the process, and most importantly, have fun with it. Coloring is a form of art in itself. With every flick of your marker, you're getting closer to mastering this. You've got this. Now, at this point of the video, you might be wondering how to color with pencils. That's why the next step is to watch my video where I talk about how to improve your coloring with one simple trick, where I'll teach you how to get better at coloring with pencils.